Hey everyone, this is the video that we've all watched, and this is the improved copy of the original video. So it has no music because I've seen all your comments saying that you want to remove the music so we can hear what they're saying, but sadly the owner of the YouTube wasn't active anymore, so I just did it myself. Enjoy the video guys and subscribe to my channel.
Alrighty, so we're here in Ron's main aviary, and this is where he kind of doesn't really necessarily specialize in anything in particular.
No, this is what's called a colony aviary. There's one bird up to 4 or 5 pair of different species for no real reason other than that's what I do. So, yeah.
Righty. And so this area here is particularly important.
Yeah, this is what we call the shed part of an aviary. An aviary should always have a couple of components. One, a home for the birds, which becomes the shed, where they can get security. They're out of the weather if they want to be. They got that choice. The temperature is reasonably constant in here. And then if they want to, they can go out there in the everyday sun, the rain, and whatever. It's necessary to have both environments for your bird to enjoy and to survive. They live in the bush, and that's got its own mixture of environments, from shrubs to hide in, to open grasslands to fly across, collect food on the week and all that sort of thing. So you need to try to provide both. You know, they haven't got to be at this scale. You can bring it down to, you know, something that only as wide as that, and that sort of depth. And in that you can have a little flight flat nut, which is out in the open, and then a small shed, just somewhere where they can get in behind or up and under. And if there's any predatory birds around, owls, cats, possum, whatever the case may be, to disturb them, they can come in here and they're secure. Especially if you want to breed finches. The difficulty is if a bird's sitting on a nest with eggs in it, if they get frightened off that nest at night time, the eggs go cold, the embryo dies, and and the birds go back and try to sit on those eggs, but they're wasting their time.
Okay.
Because they've died off. So they do need that secure if they can get it.
So this aviary is mostly for both your enjoyment and the birds' enjoyment.
Yes. More so now as I'm getting older, my enjoyment, because even though this looks big, there's too many birds in here. And I've mentioned that a few times already. It's always about overcrowding our finches. And, they need space, especially if you mix the species. You get dominant species, and this one will pull that one less to bits, and all that got a problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Is it right if we have a look around?
Go for your life. You can see some birds on the ground there. That's an Australian starfinch. They have a natural likeness to feed off the ground because it's normal. We don't like them on the ground very much because of the health problems.
Moving too fast, I know it's not true. Got me confused. I just chalk it up as you got no shoes. We were two strangers in
Yeah, be quick.
Wow.
So his nest was in there. That's his nest in there. And all that nest is a wire. That's all it is. A wire cylinder, a landing perch there, and they fill that with their grass to build a nest. I don't know whether there's any young ones currently in the box. I think they've fledged. That's typically what a finch will build as a nest inside the box. So they line it with feathers to keep the eggs warm. There's no eggs in there, the young ones are already hatched and left.
Right. And could you explain to us why you have the nest boxes facing away?
Okay. So the nest box, there's no real correct way of having a nest box. As you can see, I've got different sorts all around here. But one of the principles are when a hen bird has got young ones or eggs, they're in there. The cockbird's role is to protect that space. If I just had an open box like that one, as soon as another bird goes anywhere near it, the hen would leave that nest and tear out to chase it away. So here they've got that little alcove security, and the other bird won't go and land on that.
Yeah.
That's not natural for them. A bit of a slope on the top, that's not necessary. The theory is that birds won't land and interfere, they might slide off, but that theory went out the window a few years ago. We normally face the entrance hole away from activity. That means that either turn them sideways or backward so that any owls or something, the eagle or something flies over the birds, because they'll see that shadow and they won't leave the nest.
Okay.
The Australian star finch, they've got a nest up in that brush. That's why he's a bit anxious. That's the father. They've got a nest buried in there. I think they've got young ones on there. They put them right up the back. But that's only dead brush that they go into. That just replicates a bit of bush in the bush, a bushy plant. They go in and build a nest. Now, I don't know whether you can zoom, but carrying on to that comment, that stand of kangaroo grass, that tall brown grass, that's a native Australian grass, about halfway down, not the stick poking out this way, but the one over there, the fence, there's a nest in there with a pair of birds, the black nun, they've got young ones in there. So they'll build their own nest if they want to. The last time they had young one, buried them in there. So from that sort of box to building their own nest, that's their choice.
Yeah.
You just let them do it. Provide for it if they want to use it. They can get the nest up there. Even that's the only nest that gets built. That's a natural Australian bush tree, and yet the birds of their own choice, 90% will come in here to rear young and to breed.
So you talk about replicating their natural environment, their endemic environment,
Yep.
in an aviary.
Yep.
Can you talk a bit about the choice of plants that you have in here?
Yeah. But if you're just going to start off and keep birds, forget about the aspect of trying to breed birds. You'll get very disappointed if you focus on breeding them too early, because you won't have success, as you found out.
Yeah.
You've got to serve your apprenticeship. We don't really know why it happens, but people starting off seem to have problems otherwise. As you progress, you become more easy with them, I suppose. But in that, if you just start off as a bird keeper, now if you look at that aviary up there, you talk about habitat, forget this shed part.
Yeah.
But you see, there's that orange breast having his sticky beaks down there, and that thing, kangaroo bird, you may be able to pick it up. Now he's a very, very small finch. Very nice. That's a South African finch. They spend 90% of their time in that low plant there, that soil. You'll notice it's reasonably dense. They get in there and not much from the disturbance. It's low on the ground. Then you've got over here a wet sort of environment, a pond, orchids, and that suggests dampness, rainforesting. So there's birds in here that come from South America, and that's where their endemic habitat is around that rainforesty area. They're called Jacarini finch. Now, that's the sort of environment, so you can have that little patch for them. You can have that patch for the little orange breast and that little ruddy that was just there. you can have the open sand area with natural grasses, so that your Australian finch, the majority of Australian finches are the centre of Australia, desert, open plains and a few trees. So they can pick those areas. It gives you that choice of different landscape environments within the aviary. If you're going to be a finch breeder, that's a whole different ballgame. You only have that species in your aviary, and your landscaping is aimed at that species. So if I just wanted to breed Jacquerini, that's what I'd have. There'd be sprinklers running and there'd be palm trees, and they breed like crazy in that. So I tend to put 3 or 4 groups together and then put their different habitats around the aviary and give them, that's sort of what they want. A lot of birds just want open sand. There's a bird in Australia, a little finch, the emblema picta. He lives in the desert. He lives where there's just clumps of spinifex growing. That's all he needs. He would hate that. He just doesn't want all that dampness. He's not designed to live in that sort of environment. So yeah, you can. The landscaping, I think, is important. It should be part of your aviary. A lot of people put an aviary, put a cage, they put birds in, and they build it and design it so that they can see the bird, like you said, whose enjoyment is it? It's not there for your enjoyment. That's their life. That's where they got to live. So you can't just have it so that the way you want it, it's the way that they need it, and they'll respond accordingly. So yeah, landscaping is very, very important. Very important.
And I've just noticed here, you have these different compartment trays.
Over there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you explain the purpose of that?
Yeah, it looks nice, doesn't it? No other reasons. Other than, I suppose there is a reason. Now, tomorrow, that'll get replenished. All this has been thrown out today. And I can see, if that just have they eaten it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it gives me an idea of just what they're eating at that time.
Okay.
Because it's not a matter of just giving a bird seed.
Yeah.
5 days a week, 365 days a year. That sounds great. Yeah, I'm looking after birds, I'm feeding them well. But in that bird's lifestyle, for the month of February, he, in his own environment, possibly lives on French white millet, because the nutrients in there are tied to his genetics that he wants, or his physiology, in February. But come September, he's doing an entirely different thing. He's not breeding.
Yeah.
He's flying around as a flock, and they're just doing their thing. And they don't need that sort of, they need a different seed. They need a different set of nutrients if they're going to breed. They'll stay alive. Once again, there's key to this breeder mix.
Yeah.
And there's seed here. Now, this is a commercial mix. It's there to keep them alive. And you can see the predominance of seed that's been left. It's called panorama seed. Now, all that there, all that is panorama, it won't get eaten.
Yeah.
And you can see it is sitting here. The birds refuse to eat it. And it's becoming a problem. The commercial mixes are, well, the last check I did, 68% of their mix is that seed called panorama, and it's hopeless. And the current drought is causing all sorts of troubles getting these sorts of seeds that the birds want.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the only reason it's separate, just so I can keep a bit of a track on what they're eating and what they're not. That is there as a bulk seed just to keep them alive. There's always seed in case something happens to me and I'm not available today, or whatever reason I couldn't get down there. At least there's seed there.
Yeah.
This is important. It catches all the husk. It looks messy, but it catches all the husk when the birds take the husk off the seed to eat the middle.
Rather in here than on the floor.
Like some that got on the floor.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
That gets done every 2 days. That gets all swept up and collected, because that gets on the floor. It attracts vermin, mice, cockroaches, all those sorts of things. And it also absorbs moisture. And once you get something wet, then you get bacteria. So your aviary should be aimed at doing whatever you can to keep it fundamentally dry. Sensibly, that's now getting wet because it's raining. But that's all drained, so that water goes straight into the drains and doesn't become waterlogged. So you don't get disease, you don't get bacteria growing, you don't get it in here. There's no seed husk out there. But if I was to leave that for a week or two, that would absorb the moisture from the rain just in the air. And that's the problem.
All right. Thanks, Ron.
So there, you can keep going forever, and it all gets down to those things you asked me up there. What do you start off with making up your mind for a little while, I'll just be a bird keeper.
Yep.
Get a couple of pair of relatively cheap ones, colourful ones, and see what they do.
Yep.
If they breed, then you try something else. You go and see people's aviaries. Oh, I'd like to have something like that.
Yeah.
But you need space.
Yep. Right.
You need space.
And I guess the key is you've got to put your enjoyment first. And you've got to obviously make sure your birds are happy, but at the end of the day, it comes to the keeper, and you've got to keep interested in the hobby.
Yes, it's a funny hobby. It's not something you're going to play football, you're going to play cricket, whatever.
Yeah.
You do that. But this is entirely, you're relying on something else happening for you to get enjoyment.
Yeah.
And you've just got to provide all the requirements to allow that thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's great. There's all sorts of angles that come into it. We've done a survey on our Finch Club, and predominantly our membership structure, the 50 to 60-year-old and onwards, if you look at our graph, 60-70% of our people are in that age bracket.
Yep.
So we're desperately trying to put something behind them as they fall off the perch in 10 years' time sort of thing. There's very few people coming on to keep the agricultural hobby going. Of course, the less people in it means the less birds that are bred. If you don't keep birds breeding and keep a genetic base, a spread of genetics, you finish up with inbreeding with the few birds that are available. As soon as you start to inbreed, you get genetic faults. The birds can't fly properly, they can't breed properly, they become less and less. And then you see what's happening right across the world, the things disappear. Whole species will just disappear because they just have lost their environment to breeding. And that's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
We're imposing on their habitat, changing it, and the birds can't, most animals can't acclimatise to it.
Yeah.
So what we do, it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And so, if you're thinking about keeping finches and you meet the criteria that Ron's given us today, just go for it. Because at the end of the day, it's a great hobby to be in, and we don't want the hobby to die. So
we don't want the species to disappear.
Exactly.
And let's not get too carried away. Talking currently all the focus on the coal mines and all that, taking the environment, but that's politically one thing. The very birds they're concerned about in that area used to be in northern New South Wales. Now they moved from there, and that's simply because we had to farm the land that they used to breed in, because we've got to feed the people. So without the farms, you've got no food for the people. So it becomes a balance. It's all very nice saying, we've got to protect the species, irrespective of what. But if you want to live on the earth as well, you need space, you need food.
Yeah.
And so it's always very important to keep that balance in mind. And in doing that, that's why I mentioned those factors in breeding. There's an awful lot of mutations being bred. And you'll find those if you've got young people want to get involved, they're very colourful, but they're genetically weak and they won't sustain the species. So,
all right, thanks for the advice, Ron.
yeah, okay, well, it's there. Space, volume, number of aviaries. I always say, build as big as you can when you can.
Yeah.
And while the space is available, but always keep in mind, if they do breed, see, half of these birds should be able to breed.
Yeah.
But my holding cage now is full because I've got another person's birds on minding. So I've got to leave them in here. Now that overcrowds. I would have liked to have been able to show you some young ones, but I think they've left in the last couple of days. I think they've left. There's a nest with eggs in.
Those are Gullian eggs?
They'll be Gullians. That's not a big bird, and yet they're pretty big eggs.
Yeah.
And there's 6 eggs in there. They take a bit of covering. So, stone cold, so they've been left.
Okay.
So, for whatever reason, those eggs are no good. They've got to be kept warm for a fortnight, and then after a fortnight, they need 3 weeks before the young one can leave the nest. And 5 weeks they need the young ones are left. They'll all get cleaned out there. You can see the mess they make. One nest full of, there's about 4 Gullians in here. They've all come out. I think there's one flying around here.
We might get some when you have the
North bird tray in here. There it is. Yeah, the rain got it, that's great. So that's the maggots I spoke about compared to the mealworm.
So definitely much smaller.
A lot smaller.
Yeah. And do the birds prefer that over mealworms?
Hard question, because once again, nominate a month a year.
Yeah.
Nominate what they're doing.
Okay.
At that stage, nominate the size of the bird. I've got colony birds. I've got birds that will take mealworms, and I've also got the little blokes who will take the magnet.
Yeah.
So it's horses for courses. But see, there's nothing wrong with that getting wet. If they're standing out there now, it's raining. Now, those birds have got to, if they're living in the wild, they've got to eat somewhere tonight. If the practice raining, they can't just go home and stop indoors. They've got to come down the grass and they've got to find food.
Yeah.
So they'll eat wet food. They have no option. It's all about provide the habitat if you can and make that complementary to the environment the birds in. The part of the excitement and the thrill of having birds is to then research the environment that they make from the habitat. Where were they designed to live? In the middle of Africa, in the middle of Mexico, and to look at what grows there, what food sources there, what sort of seeds, what sort of grasses grow there.
Yeah.
And that's if you're going to have those birds, you try as best you can to replicate that. You won't always do it, and then you're up with just buying finch food from Woolworths or somewhere.
Yeah.
Your birds will live, but don't expect them to breed.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they're not getting the nutrition they need from and they're designed to require it. Not like chooks. Battery chooks nowadays, their design and their physiology is to lay 1 million eggs or to get fat for the meat from them. So they're fed and bred accordingly. That's the Fijian bird, the red-faced parrotfish. It comes from the Fiji Islands and Java and all that, Indonesia and down into Fijis. The ruddies come from South Africa. There's a whole range of little birds come out of South Africa. I don't know why.